Welcome, guys. Good afternoon. This is Mike Sarraille with the Talent War Group Leadership Collective. What is the Talent War Group Leadership Collective? It's just that, a group of people that I've helped put together that outshine me on a daily basis. We're actually going to get into that subject. On episode 29, leaders should not be outshined by their followers. But before we get into it, I want to turn it over to our two guests, Joe Barnard and Joseph Kopser. Joe, we'll start with you. Give the audience a overview of who you are and where you come from.
Yeah, everybody, great to be here. Thanks, Mike. Joe, great to be with you. I spent 33 years in the Air Force. I was a pararescue man and a combat rescue officer, retired in 2016 as lieutenant colonel. After I got out, I ran a wireless construction company for a while, really enjoyed that. Then I am now running the Ford School. It's a startup residential treatment center for teen boys. And so the sense of service associated with what I had as a rescue specialist, really, that's sort of the reason why I left the wireless construction company and came over here to Ford School. So happy to be here. And I know the other guys are going to drop some nuggets and I'm going to tag along.
Joseph.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Mike. Joe, nice to connect with you here on the forum. So my story is kind of a mixed bag in terms of all the different things I've gotten into. 20 years in the Army, a couple of trips in and out of Iraq, that kind of stuff. Got into the private sector early on with some fellow vets. Built a company called Ride Scout, later sold it to Mercedes. Got tired of our politics being the land of dysfunction, so I ran for Congress a couple of years back, which is like building another startup. And then the last couple of years, I've been working with a lot of different companies trying to grow what they're doing. And then most recently, I'm working with the president of the University of Texas for all things military, veteran, and family related. So having a great time doing it. Leadership is the core of all of it. And Mike, thanks for having me as a part of today.
Happy to have you both back again, Joe and Joseph. I consider them amazing leaders. I think that's the unique thing about this group is not only do they have very successful, high-performing careers in the military, they've brought those same leadership principles to the business world. Leadership is leadership regardless of domain. The principles never change. The execution is very hard, guys. And I want to thank you as you join us on a subject that I know you're passionate about. And for the audience, if you think that title is what we believe, you're absolutely wrong. If you believed in that title, that leaders should never be outshined by their followers, you're basically saying that as a leader, you should hold on to all control. You should never empower your people. You should be the critical point of failure for your organization, which nothing moves beyond, and you should kill all initiative for your people. And if you do that, I guarantee you one thing: your organization will never grow, and two, your organization will most definitely fail. I know we've got my dog going crazy in the background there. I apologize. I'm at home today.
Your biggest fan.
Hey, he's a guard in the home as we get deliveries from Amazon. He's probably the most hated dog on the route. It is a Dutch Shepherd, which I know, Joe, you probably used on a couple of your missions. Pretty scary at first sight. But guys, this concept that leaders should never be outshined is so vitally important. I know for me, and again, I'm probably going to hear from you, and you'll mirror my thoughts, is that when I was a leader of an organization, it was almost mandatory that my people outshine me. And one, that entailed that I had to train them to that standard. I had to constantly put them into stretch positions slightly above their competency and help them grow through those scenarios, coach and mentor them along the way. But if you did that long enough, if you put enough time into your people, they eventually started to outshine you. And that didn't hit my ego whatsoever. Joe, you said it before we stepped onto here. I think there was a point where younger Mike really liked recognition. I did, but I can't tell you what it was about this specific moment that I started to realize I would rather be a middle level performer on a winning team that found such pride in knowing that he contributed to a team win. And as I became older, that affected my leadership style. But not only running the organization, this is mandatory for hiring. Is you put good people forward. You put your best people forward, because your best people, the A players, which we wrote about in the book, The Talent War, will select other A players. And what that means is somebody who's already a high performer within your organization, within the respective industry, can look at a younger man or woman and say that person is going to they're going to raise the bar on me. They're going to bring healthy competition to into the organization. And guess what? They may outshine me, but I don't matter. The team is what matters. And so that is absolutely a person we're going to select into the organization. Joe, let's start with you. Thoughts on what I'm saying?
Yeah, man, I totally agree. A couple stories come to mind. The first one I'll bring out, I'll do a higher one, is, we do the military decision-making process and mission analysis with the generals, and we're doing COCOM plans and CONOPS and things of that nature. I always loved the generals that wanted an outside-the-box COA. You get a couple, two conventional COAs, and you probably know which direction you're going to go for these sort of CONOPS. But to have other people creativity sort of come in, let them sort of explore different boundaries and outside the limits, and encourage that. Come up, man, be smarter than me. It's just great. And then the collection of the team and the discovery of all the different expertise, whether it's logistics or IT or ops or intel, admin, whatever you bring together, and then you come in with this outside the box COA. It's every time I saw a flavor of that outside the box COA go into COA 1 or 2, that was sort of chosen to go out. And so I just thought that it's great when there's a vortex of a leader that pulls great information up and ingenuity up. And if not, you're going to have stagnation. You're going to have complacency, all bad words, all super bad words when it goes in. And it's about the enterprise moving forward, not about sort of the individual. So I appreciated that. And I got other stories from sort of the subordinates up too. But yeah, I love this topic.
Hey, Joseph, you've got some great experience. One, I'd love for you to expand on the first company you stood up, fresh out of the military. I used to brag about this because I came to Austin. That's where I met you. I was still in active duty. And people in Austin know who you are, and they tell the story of Ride Scout.
Yeah, well, thanks. So just to build on Joe's point, so you think about how we describe what it is for this need for these toxic leaders to just bring everything and say, I mean mine. If we're going to be successful, I get the credit. It's all about me. And then, like the title says, they're trying to outshine their followers, which we know to be ass backwards. And so for people who maybe think that, oh, well, that's just in a military context, I couldn't imagine that in a civilian context or a business context. I think the best example is thinking about equity and how you literally share the credit of the company. And by that, it's success in terms of how much they have as ownership. I've seen so many young entrepreneurs, and when I mean young, I don't mean by age, I mean young in the process. They could be in their 40s like I was, who think that what they have to do is get 100% ownership of the company and then hold on to it to the end. So if they ever have an exit, then they get all the benefit. And that is so backwards. And it's literally the epitome of them trying to outshine their teammates. And so what happens, I tell them all the time, look, you can either have 100% of a big fat zero when you're a failure, or you can just keep giving up your share of the company so that the share of the company and the credit of others on your team expands to the point where when you sell your company or you go through an IPO or you have a great moment, the risk that you had beginning gets shared by everybody. But more importantly, the credit when it succeeds is enjoyed by everybody. And that's my favorite civilian or business example of how people can learn to just share that credit by literally sharing the equity and sharing the credit.
Now, Joseph, I'm going to come right back to you. Before we started this, you talked about as a founder, sometimes you struggle with your ability to remove you from the brand. Yes, you stood up the company, but ultimately the brand is the team. I saw on the wall of a marketing firm yesterday, we either win as a team or we don't win at all. But you brought up a great point about equity. You could own 100% of nothing, or you could be selfless in order to empower people and to push them to outshine, give them a little bit of equity, which means you grow the company larger and ultimately you benefit in the long run. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about branding. Look, I'm not throwing any shade at all on people who brand their company with their name. That's fine. That's a choice. Do that. I didn't in the early days. In fact, the most clever name I could think of for Ride Scout was Going My Way, because Going My Way is what we're trying to do to consolidate, before Uber and Lyft really existed, the ways for people to get to and from where they're going to go. But our team kept coming back to me and saying, now, Joseph, we're not trying to say your baby is ugly, but the name Going My Way is terrible for two reasons. Number one, for SEO management, every time someone says Going My Way, they get that movie from back in the 1950s and they're never finding our service. And secondly, people think Going My Way is like a hitchhiking app. And again, think about it, you got to put your brain back 10 plus years ago, before Uber and Lyft. People couldn't imagine getting in a car with a stranger, even though we were pioneering that idea. So the team came and said, we've got to change this name. But to your point, Mike, and to the point of this topic, I had so connected my personal sense of entrepreneurship or my success as an entrepreneur to this name Going My Way. And by the team coming in saying, we got to change the name, I took it initially as an insult, frankly. I said my baby was ugly. But then when I sat back and said, you know what? This is about us. This is not about me. Hit me with your best ideas. And the two best ideas they boiled it down to were Bounce and Ride Scout. And we chose Ride Scout and we've never looked back. And thankfully I didn't put my ego in the way and we let the team shine and not one person.
Joseph, you bring up a great point. Here's the thing that's how you just said it sounded very easy, but a lot of leaders are struggling with the ability to let go of control. Again, as I contemplate and sort of reflect on my time as a younger junior officer, I struggled with this. Joe, you've led special operations units where you eventually had to push your guys out the door and let go of control. You have a lot of experience doing this. I'm sure you got to grow into it. What do you say to a leader who's struggling with letting go of control, knowing that, yes, some failure may come out of it, but the people will learn?
Yeah, so I think it all boils down to preparation and how prepared you are. And so we trained every scenario. If I couldn't, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Our training was almost harder than the actual mission. So when you do send young guys out the door, and then that's the way I was brought up too. I luckily spent a bunch of time as an enlisted guy before I got commissioned. And so they trained us so they could trust us. And so it's playing the long game. It's doing repetitions. It's planning, execution, debriefing, and the debriefing is so much important. And it's constantly doing that over again and getting 1% better each day. And before you know it, you have some pipe hitters that are they're problem solving. They have second, third order of effect that's just coming at them, and they completely understand it, and they're promoting good ideas. They're giving you outside the box codes. It's just a snowball down the right hill. So if you don't dedicate the time to your HR processes, especially not only hiring, but training and developing and allowing people to work on sort of outside the projects, outside the left and right limits of their job duty description, then you're sort of going to be, not where you want to be. So that's my suggestion.
Hey, Joe, I think you just gave us a great transition. So guys, ultimately what we're talking about is culture.
Yeah.
How do you create a culture where you as the leader encourage your people to give you a run for your money? I know we called this, competition makes the world go round, but we have to be very careful in the military. Healthy competition makes the world go round. The business leaders listening, what advice would you give them on how to start building these cultures? I mean, Joe, you're talking about training. Training is mandatory. How do you build these cultures where you're building that healthy competition and you're encouraging your people to overtake you in capability and competence.
Yeah. Joe, you want to take that, or you want me to kick it off?
Joseph, you go first.
Yeah, so I think it's very simple. Again, if you're not doing these things, I am not throwing shade on the practice because it's very mainstream. But there's a couple of different things we can think of, like a simple thing as a parking spot and how close that parking spot is to the front door. I don't know if you remember, we used to have these things called offices. We used to go there, almost all of us regularly. But think about the culture of just simply the approach to your building. If you, the leader, are given the easy way to the front door and your folks have got to walk even farther, that's already sending a message that you consider yourself different than them. Now, I totally get it. There's efficiency in time, and I'm not getting into all that. We can talk about that later. But how about the physical layout of the office? I know it's quite common that the boss always likes to take the corner office with the biggest view, but we made a deliberate effort when we were building out Ride Scout. After Mercedes acquired our company and we had the resources to really do it right, we put the corner offices as our conference rooms. We put the corner in the outside windows as where we entertain guests. And almost everybody in the company all shared space in the middle. And my desk was right next to the next person, right next to the next person. And by leading by example that I want them to be able to have the resource to go into that corner office with a visitor or guest. And that gives them, to your point, Mike, about this idea that they could just as easily move up. Upward mobility in a company is based on talent and skill, not based on some hierarchy of, well, I'm the VP of this and you're the VP of that and I'm the senior VP and all of that stuff that gets in way of everybody's ego. So anyway, that's just one small example.
No, that's great. And actually, Joe, you're in the midst of a startup. How many months in? You're standing up the Ford School.
Yeah, we're 8 months into it, and we've been open since January. Yep.
Hey, could you tell the audience a little about the purposeful work that you're actually doing at the Ford School?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. We're a residential treatment center for teen boys. These are teen boys that have had developmental trauma. Some of the worst stories you can imagine, that's what these boys have experienced, and helping them try to transition into manhood and for them to understand how to attune and co-regulate when their frontal lobe really just isn't working at times and they're acting out. Their defiance is just really high and the family is dysregulated. Home, sports, and school is just not, it's gone down. And so through empathetic therapy and individualized academics and routine adventure experiential, we're trying to help these boys get back online and have them see this amazing windshield that's in front of them. And so just like rescue ops, when people pull the fire alarm and say, hey, we need help in combat, something really went bad, that's very complex. This is a very complex business as well. Once you start taking on the care and feeding of teen boys who are dysregulated 24/7, the amount of staff, what it takes, your procedures, are you doing, don't do more harm. You got to sort of help. And also having that long view and those reps of, we have this clinical modality called CASA, commitment, acceptance, security, attunement. And it's just like the OODA loop: observe, orientate, decide, and act. Commitment, acceptance, security, attunement. You're just running repetitions with these boys to try to get them to where they go, oh man, I'm self-regulating here instead of guardian regulating and sort of calling them out. So there's many nirvana moments, but for somebody to give you their kid and to be in this sense of service to try to help their kid. You imagine the shame and embarrassment of parents who go, man, my 13, 14, 15-year-old, I can't control. I got to give them away for a year to a school to try to help fix them. It's just, these stories just are, they're not good. But the treatment path is while it's opaque, there is medical, science foundation behind it to where we can get from point A to point B and help heal these boys. And so the sense of service I get from it and we get from it as a staff is just amazing. And so we're growing the staff and we're growing our procedures and we're taking it on. We're just chipping away at it. And so it's just awesome.
Hey, Mike, if I can interrupt a second. Joe, you said something I think is fascinating. Imagine what it's like for parents, the leader of the family, to have to recognize that there's somebody else that needs to be brought in, which is you and your opportunity, and they have to give up a little bit of that credit, if you will, as the leader. I think that's powerful. That's probably the hardest of all.
Yeah.
Well, you guys, I got to say that probably also segues into mental health today. You know, we came up into culture, let's be honest, in the military back in the 90s and 2000s, where suffer in silence was the mantra.
Suck it up.
Suck it up.
Yep.
And guys, the hardest thing that any human can do, to include leaders, is to raise their hand and say, hey, I need a little help. What's even more courageous is to say, even though I am the leader of this organization, I am the founder of this company, you're asking us to embark on a path which I've never been on. And so we need to bring somebody in, Joseph, who knows how to do this. And I'm going to let go of a little control and actually engage and trust that they're going to drive us down the right path. That's huge. You know, Joseph, as we've got other people from Talent War Group listening to this, I'm actually moving out of that corner office and I'm being moved into the common area because Taryn's laughing because Taryn and the rest of the team are the ones in the trenches moving the company forward. I'm sort of the idea guy. Well, the idea guy can do that in the common space where the ideation is going on, but they're not the true and real work. So I'm going to tell you that hit my ego a little. Is that, you know, I grinded for a while and I'm losing this office, but it's for the good of the organization. And even Carly Walden helped me realize that. So thank you for bringing that point up. Hey, I want to say to the listeners, please, if you have questions, Joe and Joseph have a wealth of experience. This is why we do this. We're not preaching from a pulpit. We've just got some experiences that we can help share. And we also want to hear your experiences. I know we had one just come in from Jeffrey. I'm going to give a good attempt at your last name. I think it's Bruno. You know, guys, he says, delegate authority, not just tasks.
Yep.
And I understand what Jeffrey's saying there. Any thoughts on his comment?
Yeah. Well, if I can, Joe, I'm going to pop in real quick. So this is early in the days of Ride Scout. So it was probably when we were a team of about 14 or 15, and there's just no way you can do every activity. So you have to let some of it go. You have to delegate that authority. And so, you know, as far as final permission and sign off on email lists, I mean, at one point, I remember we had an email list of about 300,000 people. And sure enough, we had that day where the team sent out the email that says, dear, and in brackets, first name, comma, and then went through the rest of the message. And that, for me, was a real test as a leader because, to Jeffrey's point, I delegated that authority. And with that, though, I retained responsibility. So when we as a team messed it up, it still came back on me. Nobody was fired. Nobody was thrown out. It just was what it was. And then in another case, I'll never forget, we had a line of code that didn't quite close a loop correctly. And basically what it did was cause everyone's cell phones, you know, their phones when they were running our app to just drain the battery. Like it just drained the battery because it was constantly using all your processor speed on your phone. And the hate that we got and the ratings, it was terrible. But again, on me. But even so, in doing so, one of the teammates who was a part of that problem, he said, you know, that was me. That was my line of code. So we ended up taking a Photoshop photo, and he wanted to volunteer to put himself in a battery bath. In other words, we took a bath on that one. We got all messed up, and we had all these images of batteries in there. So it was a sense of humor with some levity, just to admit mistakes. But luckily, I'd had enough bosses previous in life that said you can delegate authority, but you still retain responsibility. So if it screws up, don't just go and blame them because you said, well, I put you in charge, you jacked that up. No, you put them in charge because that's the right thing to do. But if it goes poorly, you are still responsible. And man, I see so many leaders who can't quite get that concept, but we'll see. That's the whole point of the Talent War Group, isn't it, Mike?
It is. Joe, any comments?
Yeah, I think the nirvana of delegation is, you know, like I have several directors underneath me right now, and they have anywhere from 25 to 4 people. And so in their job duty description, their job map, and their performance feedbacks, we evaluate what their left and right limits are, what they can and can't make decisions on. And so, that, you know, there's got to be that clear understanding of when you hire somebody, what you hired them to do. But the nirvana moment is when they come into my office and they want to discuss, hey, I was thinking this, what do you think about this? And that's like Now that's just great. When you're working on the 5 W's and costs, and there's suspenses and there's end lines, and you chip away at it and you solve this, and now you're moving on to the next thing, and your policies and procedures are getting better. We're coordinating with the state because we're monitored by the state of Tennessee on what we're doing. It's the same thing while I was in the military. It's not telling guys how to do, but when they come to you like, hey, I thought about this, and did you have this experience with sort of disciplining somebody or motivating somebody or rewarding somebody or doing extra training, or this cost isn't what I need it to be and I want to do this. It's all these different things on the complexity of business. When you have that culture to where not only do they know their left and right limits, but they have the comfort to come and have a conversation, man, now you're cooking with gas and you're sort of moving places. And as a leader, it's just awesome to go, man, you're doing right. You get to affirm the affirmation that you get to give somebody, that they're thinking right, they're doing right, their suspense timeline is right. They brought in other people with creativity. That was right. I mean, it makes the hairs on your arm stand up on how good building that team is, because it's absolutely about the enterprise. It's about what you're doing. It's not about the individuals.
Guys, as I'm listening to you, I'm sort of contextualizing my past experiences, and I'm learning here. One, Joe, you hit it on recognition. I can't put a pinpoint it, but there became a time in my life, and it still is prevalent, where I love to recognize the people on my team more than I like receiving recognition for my own deeds. I almost have an allergic reaction when people try to recognize me. There's nothing like passing recognition for work well done. But I will tell you this: another tools and techniques that I've picked up from leaders is they said recognize people, but then force those people that just did amazing work to share their best practices within the organization. It's like a salesperson who just crushed it for the quarter, and you recognize them, they're the salesman of the quarter. But now, hey, what I'm going to ask you to do as a leader is sit down for 20 minutes and tell your colleagues what you did and how they could potentially use some of those practices to elevate their game. Guys, this goes back to culture. What are your thoughts on getting those best practices spread between people and recognizing them? Too much recognition, too little recognition. There is a balance. How have you dealt with that in the past?
Yeah, I would say, so I think you and George have had a couple great posts lately. One, you talked about challenging leaders and giving them special projects that you want to sort of grow the company quicker or faster or something that needs to get done. And then George is talking about impact. A players want to make an impact on the company. What I've done with recognition is I usually do it quarterly. I don't like to do it monthly because, hey, we're supposed to get there and there's a paycheck and there's, you got to sort of, if you're playing a long game, then sort of stuff has to sort of work its way out. And I think quarterly is a good way to do it. But also, we're sort of having, a kumbaya moment here and we're all happy and smiling and this is all great cultures, but the accountability of your people that are underperforming is as important to your good people as it is to the people that are underperforming. It just, accountability is just sort of key. Like, this is what I'm measuring you on. These are the KPIs associated with your job duty description. You fell short here. You went over. We have to talk about a little bit about, that 10% to sort of take up more than 10% of your time because they're just not getting it or not doing it. So are they savable? Are they not? Do they have a good attitude? Are they competency? Are they constantly working on that competency? And so those are always all the things I'm always working on and looking at.
Hey, Joseph, you said something which I think some leaders, to include myself, have to learn the hard way. Is sometimes you have to allow leaders to try to be all places at once and try to control all things. And it got to a point where I wore myself out.
Yeah.
And again, it took a great mentor to pull me to the side and help me realize the error in my ways. What in your life? I mean, reflect on your ability. Did that come naturally to you, or do you have to learn that the hard way? How do you train leaders to understand that earlier?
Totally had to learn the hard way. So here's what I figured out recently. During 2020, we're kind of reflecting on how we got to now. One of the things that I found fascinating was, 30 years ago when I was 20 years of age, I was working with 20-year-olds and we were all transitioning to our first real leadership position. And then when we were in our late 20s, in my case, going into company command in the Army, I realized now I was working again with the lieutenants and the senior, well, not senior NCOs, but the NCOs that were also in their 20s that were moving into their first leadership position. And I got to watch them make that transition from direct leadership, leading people, to then my own experience into indirect leadership in the next, rank up. In this particular case, as an S3 or an XO, you've got basically now 2 tiers below where the gas pedal is. And that's the hardest part, is figuring out where the gas pedal is and recognizing that when you hit the gas, sometimes because you're not in direct leadership, you're a leader of teams who are leading their own teams, it's going to take a while and it's going to take patience. So what I had to learn as a leader myself is that there has got to be a plan or a way or a milestone or a metric to allow me to measure the speed by which it's going so that I don't get impatient. And trust me, I drove a lot of people that worked with me, around me, for me, crazy, because I was wanting to always be there, always want to know what's going on. Being able to take that step back and go, look, I just gave the warning order right now. It's going to take time to disseminate just the warning to the rest of the group, and then go back, formulate the plan, go back, check on it. Same thing in business, same thing in organizations, nonprofits, companies, the military. If you want to be in a position to influence people, to allow them to be their best, you've got to develop that. In the military, it was called tactical patience, to let the scene develop before you continue to try to adjust every knob and lever. And if you do, you never take your hands off the levers, and then no one ever does anything, and then it all goes to hell.
Joseph, you bring up a great point from Chris Grimm here. He said, you have to let your people take ownership of whatever their mission is, support them as they do it, and ask a few questions. I'm assuming he's saying here, what are you doing?
Yep.
What are your obstacles? And how can I help? Guys, one of the things I've learned that I've gotten better at is, Joseph, if you give vague guidance and say, hey, I just need you to go stand up this initiative and get it done.
The hand wave.
Yeah, the hand wave. Just go get it done. And then after a week, you've got no situational updates. You're going to start to get frustrated. And I think one of the things within Talent War Group that we're working on is we give initiatives, we allow them time to plan. And then we've also driven home this thing to, hey, set up phases and due dates, and then brief us on your plan. And if we know your plan, we know your milestones, we know your due dates. If we just take the 20 minutes to pause, the tactical patience you're talking about, just to pause, sit down and talk about that sort of gives us the comfort. And as a leader, I can pull back a little more, knowing that they've already set, again, milestones, due dates. And then also communication. Hey, give us updates at least end of week, where it's at, in some sort of structured format. For us in the military, it's a sit rep, a situational report. But you don't always see a lot of great project management in the military. I can only assume Ride Scout was moving at the speed of light, because one, you're a startup, and Joe, same thing. You're trying to stand something up as quickly as possible, increase the number of students. How do you guys run your team from a project management standpoint that enables the leaders to be a little more hands-off?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to Dennis's comment here, talking about, authority and responsibility. And if you give somebody responsibility without authority, you're just asking them to push a wet noodle. And who wants to do that?
Unfunded mandates.
Yeah, I mean, that is, underwater basket weaving, whatever joke you want to imply here, but it is no fun. Absolutely. And one of the things I always did is I said, hey, if you're going to give me that authority or responsibility, I want the authority along with it. I used to ask for it. Yeah. And, my bosses appreciated that. And so, you got to be organized, and just the way you laid it out there, Mike, was just perfect. You got to have phases. So it's the art of commander's intent, right? You don't want to give them too much, but you can't give them a whiteboard to go say, hey, make me a Picasso. Yeah. Make this Picasso off this whiteboard. Right. So you got to give them enough flavor of sort of, the 5 W's without solving the problem for them, because they're going to solve it way better than what you think. If you have that initial thought as a creative and go, hey guys, I need you to help me do this. I need our residency to sort of be better. How are we going to get the boys outside more? Chef, hey, I need to have gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free organic meal here, but I can only spend, $333 per meal per day. How do we do that? What vendors are we going to go to? I mean, they could solve all sorts of problems. These people are SMEs, subject matter experts inside what you're doing. Hopefully that's what you've hired there. And so you got to give out equal authority responsibility. And what you laid out there, Mike, associated with all the details of how you check and play that long game, I think that's absolutely perfect.
You do make a great point, Joe, and I'm going to turn to Joseph on this one. If you want to give somebody authority, are you also giving them authority to make changes to the intent of the initiative, as long as the desired end state doesn't change? I know that because that's your intellectual property. You passed an initiative that you want done, but you want to give somebody authority.
No, you totally do. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you got it.
Yeah. So here's the way I look at it. It breaks down like this. In fact, hey babe, can you shut that door? I got my puppy just came in, so she's wanting to run around. She's gonna jump all over the microphone. But the point being, so what you're looking at now is you say, okay, here's the big picture of what we want. Here are the milestones that we're shooting for, and these are the goals that we have. And to Joe's point a second ago, there's probably nothing more rewarding as a secure leader. Now, an insecure leader, insecure with him or herself, is going to be a nightmare. But a secure leader who has somebody come back, just like my team with renaming the company, and they say, look, we think there's a better way to do this. We're going to lay out the pros and cons. And oh, by the way, if you have a really healthy environment, they don't even need to go back and ask for permission. That is a highly functioning organization, decentralized. You guys wrote about it beautifully in your book, The Talent War. If you can create that kind of a culture, and what I teach every team, whether it was in politics, whether it was in academia and business, is crosstalk. Look, I want y'all to see if you can solve it. And if you two agree as teammates, do it. The only things I ever expect y'all to bring to me is when you two can't when you two can't agree, then bring them to me. But otherwise, if you two all agree, 4 of you, 5 of you, whatever it is, however many heads or divisions you have in your organization, that's the best kind of empowerment. And that's what I love to see.
Amazing. That's a great perspective, Joseph. Hey guys, we're hitting about the 35-minute mark, and we're glad to have these conversations. We love having these conversations. I think we learn more from the three of us and Taryn than our audience probably learns from us. But hey guys, I want to turn it to last thoughts, advice to leaders on empowering their people to outperform them and ultimately cement their legacy of leadership, that they left the organization better than they found it, more capable than when they found it. So we'll start with Joe. Joe, we'll go to Joseph, and then Taryn. We'll turn it over to Taryn to wrap up the 3 major takeaways from her perspective. And I totally 100% failed to introduce the biggest badass on this panel of 4, and I'll do that right after Joseph finishes up his points. Joe, last thoughts.
Yeah, my last thoughts are, while we sort of joked about the topic of this talk, you still have to come in and work on your affect as a leader. You got to work on your cognitive and study as a leader. You got to work on your health daily. It's amazing how many unhealthy people are out there. That sort of boggles my mind. You got to work on yourself and sort of that healthy competition amongst even though you'll never be better than the young people that are coming up behind us because we're bigger, stronger, faster, smarter, quicker, all that stuff, you still got to try to keep up with them. And that empowers them. That makes them that's a good carrot on the wind for them as a leader, is what you're trying to do to your culture there. And then, really it's about rolling up the sleeves. If they want you to roll up the sleeves with them, there's times that you need to get into the conference room with them. And if they're having a hard time solving a difficult problem, it's just sort of being there, not as a leader, but also as a team member. Have we thought about this? What do you think about this? Oh, let me go research this and get back to you. Taking on some project. If I see people that are, working for me that are stressed out about some stuff, hey, let me take some of this off your plate. Let me help you sort of go do this and do this for you and give it to you. It's playing a long game with your folks and sort of keep them around. Because if your hiring process is right, you brought in a bunch of A players and you want them to be there for a long time. You want them to make a career. You want them that ownership associated with what you're building. This is their project as well, all your project. So that's what I would have to say, man. You got to have a great attitude, but you can't – listen, compassion and accountability are not opposing. If you just have all compassion, no accountability, you're jacked. If you have all accountability and no compassion, then you kids get off my yard. That's not good. So it's a delicate balance of the science and art, and you really have to work on it all the time.
I'm still working. Joseph?
Yeah, let me see if I can wrap this up from my perspective. And thanks again, Mike and Taryn, for setting this up and inviting me. And Joe, it's been cool to sit and listen to your story, and what you're doing, I think, is amazing. It's needed more in society. That's for damn sure. So I tell any audience that'll give me a chance to listen, people will be what they can see. People will be what they can see. So as a leader, you're already setting the standard. You setting the standard that it's all about consolidation. It's all about me, and I'm going to climb on the back of every person in this company till I get to the top. I've seen it. I've been in those organizations, and it sucks. The other thing is that there's a role of a leader to create a good leader, to create the bench of the future leaders. There's nothing more rewarding or satisfying than when I see former students, former lieutenants, former NCOs, former members of the Ride Scout team, even former members of my campaign team who go on to higher levels, literally and figuratively, than I ever achieved. Like whether they're in brigade command. I never got to brigade command. I got to be an acting squadron commander for about 6 months, but that's as high as I got. But I've got former lieutenants and peers that are brigade commanders. That's awesome. But one story I'll end with you where it kind of ties this all together. In fact, it was when I was in squadron command briefly at Fort Bliss. I wanted to go out to the range with a troop, and Steve Teggy was the troop commander out there, and he, big barrel-chested dude, invited all of his soldiers to get into a pugo stick competition with him, and they had all kinds of different, and they were in the sun, and it was the sand, and it was miserable, and they were beating the shit out of everybody. And then he looks over at me because I was out there on the range that day, and he said, "Hey, sir, come on." And right at that moment, Mike, I had that moment that you were talking about earlier. Do I stay here on the sidelines for my ego? I'm the squadron commander, or do I realize that being out there in competition, letting them get at it, might help? And sure enough, I got out there. I held my own as long as I could. But if you ever met Steve Teggy, you'll know why. That dude is a beast. And in the very end, he knocked me to the ground, and it was all over. But two things came out of it. Number one, I think leading by example, I showed the team that to have stronger teammates than the next person up is good for the organization. But two, the fact that I had the courage or the lack of awareness, whatever you want to call it, insanity, to get out there, the soldiers, the team appreciate it, respect it, whatever word it was. I don't know. I'm not trying to glorify what I did, but I do know this. To this day, I'm still in touch with Steve Teggy, and it's been over 10, 12 years. And that, I believe, is where it all wraps together. People will be what they can see. And if you can be a part of an organization that encourages that kind of cooperation and participation, you're on to something big. And if you're in an organization, you got a terrible boss, reach out to the Talent War Group, reach out to me at Grayline Group. We want to help you solve that problem. And so thanks again, Mike, for having me on the show today.
Hey, Joseph, glad to have you. People will be what they can see.
That's right.
Beautiful. Set the example. All right, Taryn, I'm going to do a quick introduction for Taryn here. Taryn is an executive search consultant with Talent War Group. But before she decided to cut her teeth in this industry, which she is killing it, and is a future leader of this company. She's a leader in the company. But I know one day she'll be running it to the next level after they cut a little dead weight off their plate. But Taryn was in the Navy, and she was the 33rd woman to pass Navy SAR school. Now, search and rescue school, just to give you a sense of that, is basically like going through drown proofing for 3 weeks straight. It is not easy to pass, and that's why I say she's the biggest badass amongst the four of us here today. But Taryn, what are the three main takeaways or more that you heard from our discussion or the comments from the audience today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Joseph, to your point, the people will be what they can see, I think is really amazing. Mike, you spoke about really being engaging in trust with your team. And I think that starts, showing that you're leading by example, checking your ego as a leader, really delegating all that authority to your team, and, still taking ownership for all the mess ups. To Joseph's point, I think really shows your team that you're engaged in trust, and a pretty powerful thing. Also creating a culture of healthy competition. I think, really instilling hope and trust in your team will give them courage to start, the ball rolling towards like taking ownership over certain situations, asking questions, opening up those discussions, as Joe mentioned, to have. And I think that's kind of the beginning of themselves growing into the leaders that they're going to be, and leaving everybody's legacy behind.
Absolutely. There is no greater legacy than being part of a winning team. It's not about you. It's about the team. Taryn, thanks for wrapping that up. And I know, Taryn, this was your first one, right?
Yeah, I'm all nervous.
All right. Case of beer for Joe, Joseph, and myself. We'll be expecting that by end of week. No big deal. Well, guys, to the audience, thank you for joining us. Now, guys, I've got to promote the companies again. If you're looking for consulting services out of Gray Line, they bring teams together to enable productive problem solving. Knowing Joseph, he's an amazing leader. Bringing him into your company will have impacts. Again, Talent War Group is an executive search and a talent advisory. If you're looking to hire strong leaders that are going to come in and help shape the culture that you want, then please come to us. Additionally, if you're looking to design best-in-class talent acquisition or talent management or leadership development programs, again, reach out to us. We love coming in and working with companies to help set up those processes and procedures that are ultimately going to lead to stronger and more diverse cultures. All right, guys, thanks for joining us. Please check out the schedule on EF Overwatch for upcoming live sessions, and we look forward to seeing you again. All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks for having me.